All right, welcome back. This is going to be Macroeconomics Chapter 10, and this is going to be based on international trade and capital flows. So, if you want to pull out your notes that I've provided in the Files section of your Canvas platform, after you've read the chapter, of course, we will go through the notes. I'll give you a second. All right. Section 10.1, Measuring Trade Balances. I guess the first thing that I want to start off with, and the book was very careful to start off with, is that having a trade imbalance isn't necessarily a good thing. You can have a trade surplus and it be bad. You can have a trade surplus and it be good. You can have a trade deficit and it be a bad thing. And you can have a trade deficit and have it be a good thing, like has generally been the case in the United States. So we'll talk about all of these. But I just want you to know that, like, I don't know, a lot of politicians push the idea that a trade deficit is a bad thing. That doesn't make any sense, honestly. And we'll talk about why. Okay, so balance of trade is a gap between imports and exports, basically. Like, here we've got a really specific definition, but just think of it as the difference between imports and exports, okay? Also remember that imports and exports aren't necessarily physical things. They don't have to be like, tree trunks or computers or calculators or whatever. It can be goods, which make up a pretty good proportion of our trade. But it can also be services, which are growing as a proportion of most nations, at least most developed nations, sort of export portfolio. What's happening is the advent of the internet is allowing for nearly instantaneous communication and things of this sort. So there are a lot more. There's a lot more outsourcing of even services like, I don't know, things like legal documentation, right? The sort of things that paralegals used to do, they'll outsource that to India now is what's happening. When it comes to services for, say, a help desk, right? You need help from eBay or whatever you call in. Generally, that's going to be Malaysia, the Philippines, India. The United States actually does a lot of this when it comes to like really high-level medical stuff, like X-ray indications and sort of high-level medical testing and DNA testing and things like that. Other countries will use our services because we have really great equipment, right, and really great training in the United States university systems for medical services. So remember that services is part of this package, and it's not just the United States outsourcing to India, like it's sort of the misnomer or the misperception of what is happening in the global system. A lot of Indians are doing the same thing with American services. So be very careful about falling into the trap of just listening to the emotional things that politicians tell you, right? Okay. We also have income receipts and payments. This is not goods. It's not something physical. It's also not services. This is the financial system, right? This is when, say, I invest in a new Chinese apartment block or something, and these are the dividends that are paid out to me internationally, right? Or I'm investing in the Nikkei 500, the Japanese stock market, or a Japanese individual is investing in the NYSE or the Dow or whatever it is. Any of those payouts count as international payouts, or what economists call income payments or income receipts, okay? And so that was the third of the four pieces of what trade, or what they call the current account balance is. And then finally, we have unilateral transfers, right? And they're basically not payments for anything. Maybe they are goodwill payments, is how some economists conceive of them. And these are sort of government and charity contributions. So whenever the United States sends money to a country going through a drought or a locust, something, and there's a hunger problem in a country, or we send money to the Central African Republic to help with security services, or the Bill Gates Foundation sends money to Tanzania for malarial vaccines. All of this stuff counts as part of the current account balance, right? And we are sending money out. And generally, the United States isn't getting a lot of money in, unless there's something like Katrina or, when Puerto Rico gets hit by a hurricane, countries will pitch in and help. That does happen. We do get help from foreign nations, so it's not like we're just sending money out, willy-nilly. It's sort of a goodwill thing anytime something goes horribly wrong, right? Everybody wants to step up and show, hey, we're an ally, we're here for you, we're human, let's try to take care of this together. So unilateral transfers, keep those in mind. I would also say that these aren't necessarily like zero sum, right? They sound that way, but you are buying goodwill in a sense. You are also, in a sense, creating a market in that new country, right? So anytime the United States sends money to help build infrastructure in Africa or in Asia, the locals see that and they appreciate it and they buy goods from that country, right? And this is one of the reasons why we're getting so much of Chinese development and push into what is called the One Belt Road system, right? I would suggest that you look this up if you'd like to know more about sort of the Chinese versus the American strategy worldwide. The Chinese has the One Belt One Road policy where they are trying to develop a singular highway system all the way from basically China, the coast of China on the east side, all the way into Europe, right? Maybe into the Ukraine or even Germany. And then they also want to build a port system so that they have a sea route all the way up to South America and Europe. And so they are pushing lots and lots and lots of loans and development and things of this sort all across Africa, all across the port cities and nations in Southeast Asia, and even in sort of the old former Soviet bloc of Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, all of these stans, that you hear from Borat, Kazakhstan, right? So China is pushing very hard because they know that this isn't just us giving money away, right? We are going to get returns on this in the long run. They are going to be goodwill returns. They are going to be strategic returns. They are going to be political returns that are quietly done behind closed doors. And they are going to be market returns when the people see the Chinese are building us infrastructure and markets and helping us build our country. We're going to buy their products. And so this last one it's called soft power in the parlance of political scientists, and it's very, very important. And I don't think the United States takes this seriously enough, the diplomacy side and the investment side. But that's something for you to take into consideration. So, all right, that was a lot for an intro, right? So, fun topic. Current account balance, again, is going to be made up of goods. This is sort of hard materials and finished products. Services, this can include legal, medical, pest control, just all kinds of stuff. Probably not international pest control, right? But I guess that's a domestic service. But anyway, you get my point. Income receipts and payments, so these are payouts from investments. And then unilateral transfers, and these are government and charitable contributions. Okay, so if we move down to section 10.2, trade balances in historical and international contexts, you can see that America was generally on a trade balance until 1990 or so. It really started to change around 1980 when economists started to realize that, hey, a balanced trade deficit doesn't really mean anything, right? It's not a naturally good thing. And having a trade deficit can be a good thing, right? We're selling finished products at really high prices, but our citizens are getting finished products at incredibly low prices, right? And so our citizenry is actually doing really well and has a much higher standard of living because we have this trade imbalance. We also don't, what is the likelihood we're going to be selling T-shirts and junk, like crappy little lower and intermediate products on the international market. It's not possible, right? Because we don't have the cheap labor to be able to do that. That's not a possibility. And so America sells really high quality, high technological input products to the developed and developing world for the most part. And so there's always going to be this imbalance of there's less demand for that stuff. There is high demand for just junk, right? I need underwear to like live. I need socks. I need shoes. I need glasses. I need toys for my kid. I need cheap clothes. So there's always going to be more demand for that cheap stuff coming in from international because we don't want to have to pay $73 for a t-shirt because it's American made. That doesn't make sense, right? And so this trade balance or imbalance is a natural thing. And having a trade deficit is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? And once economists realize what's happening after this period of the 1970s with stagflation, high unemployment, and high inflation rates at the same time that we thought was not even a possibility, economists start to really question their models and their assumptions of how the world works. We start to move away from this and stop trying to produce all our own goods domestically, and the market opens up and the American economy explodes, right? In the late 1980s and the 90s with the advent of the internet, but also with the advent of us of importing cheap goods and exporting high finished goods and sort of getting rid of all the wasteful, inefficient factories that are producing t-shirts and stuff because Thailand can do it 1,000,000 times cheaper than us. That really helped the American economy. And it made it absolutely explode. And it raised the standard of living for a lot of people because now, I can get 6 t-shirts for $6 instead of 1 t-shirt for $6. So it was absolutely a good thing for us to be running a trade deficit. All right. We're going to skip section 10.3. I'd say just look at it and sort of understand. It's just the system of how all of this stuff works, the payments, the outflows and inflows. 10.4, we're not really going to go through this a whole lot, but just know what all of these parts are. Savings plus imports minus exports, which is the current account balance, is the same as investment plus government spending minus taxes, okay? So these things, and then you can rearrange them, which is sort of part of the subsection's point in the chapter. You could rearrange them to understand how other parts of the economy work, okay? All right. Section 10.5, the pros and cons of trade deficits and surpluses. This is... Man, excuse me, I get really bad bubbling. So excuse me. Okay. I just wanted to provide some examples of good trade deficits and bad trade deficits. And we've sort of touched on some of this stuff. The idea that you run a trade deficit or you even run a lot of just borrowing, right? Which is part of the trade current account balance. Borrowing so that you can spend on infrastructure. And if you use it really smartly, it can be a huge boon to your society in the long run. And if you use it poorly, it can end you up worse off than you were to begin with, right? So examples of good trade deficits are the United States from about 1830 to about 1875, 1880. This is where we are borrowing highly to provide infrastructure with railroads. Because transportation is incredibly important in trade, and schools, because education is incredibly important in trade, especially because America wanted to sort of push into the finance and law and all of this stuff on the world scene. And then we saw an explosion of the American economy all the way up until basically the Great Depression, 1929, okay? So that's 30... 50, somewhere around 55 years of just unstoppable growth for 50 years or so after 1875, 1880 period. All the way up to the Great Depression, this borrowing and expenditure on the infrastructure of railroads, and education really helped. And we see the same thing in the 60s and 70s, the 1960s and 1970s with South Korea. South Korea borrowed heavily on the international market, but they pumped that money right back into factories, right, so that they could export stuff and into their healthcare system and their education system. And since they had a highly trained and highly healthy workforce, your labor side, and they were focused on exports rather than developing their own market, they exploded and became one of the biggest economies on the planet, and made perhaps the fastest transition to development in the history of the world. We've never seen anything like it, and we really hope, economists and political scientists hope, that other countries can follow their plan, which is what we're seeing in countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, though they haven't done it as well as South Korea. They're still sort of on that same path of export-led industrialization, and eventually a move from the second tier to the third tier on the world stage. Second tier to the first tier on the world stage, right? So South Korea, I would say, if you want to study any sort of development in modern times and how to move from an undeveloped to a developed economy, South Korea is your answer. Like, go there, study it, know the political decisions that were made, know the investment decisions that were made, understand the difference between government and private entities, and sort of how they work together to make their economy run well, because all of these things are things that America does pretty poorly at this point, and we need to get back to having a national strategy for our economy, you know? Okay, so examples of poor trade deficits is Latin America in the 1960s and the 1970s. And we've talked about this in previous chapters. This is import substitution industrialization. Instead of, like South Korea, trying to build factories focused on exporting goods to other developed markets, and on health and schools, Latin America generally tried to rebuild everything, their entire economy, so that they didn't have to buy foreign goods and they could just sell everything in their interior, in their own market. That was a complete and crippling failure across the board, and a lot of it led to coups by the militaries in South America. It led to devastating inflation and inflationary tendencies. It led to corruption, as you've seen in Brazil with Dilma Rousseff and others. It led to Mexico relying on Pemex, their nationalized oil company. It led to Venezuela just completely collapsing. Like, it's been a serious problem. Kitty, stop! Jeez, sorry. And then we have most African nations, pretty much at any time in the last 100 years or so, there has been a lot of corruption in these African countries, and instead of spending it on literally anything, basically all they're doing is stealing all this money. So that's clearly not the way to go, okay? Okay, that's it for this chapter. I will get the exam up probably today or tomorrow. I will also provide a short little video about the exam. You'll have somewhere around 10 days again to get it back to me. This time it's going to be a little harder. It is going to be multiple choice, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of short answer too. So you're going to have to do some writing. And please, don't send me hen scratch and use proper grammar and punctuation, that sort of stuff. You got computers. You're not just sitting at home or in the classroom writing. So please make it legible. But anyway, I'll get all that stuff up in the next day or two. So I hope you're all healthy and happy. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and have a wonderful day. Okay, guys?